Welcome to another Launch It podcast. Today, as always, you got me, Matt, and
we got myself, KP, and today we have two very special guests. We got Carlos and Mike, and on this podcast today, they've outdone us today and have their special wallpapers to be continued for us. We have the next one. We're working on it, but as you can tell from their graphics behind, they got some heavy-duty equipment in their background, some tankers, and we're kind of touching on that heavy equipment, specialized equipment on today's podcast, and educating ourselves and our followers about just more than the drive van, more than the reefers that you see on the road, and how we can use these type of equipments, and what like really is used, what's placed into these products. Because for the most part, you might think, okay, there's just a bunch of sand, or there's some oils and kind of transport in this sort of material, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot more that is transported in this sort of equipment than the vast majority of population really knows about. So yeah, I'd like either Carlos or Mike kind of take the reign and introduce you guys off what you guys do, and touch on equipment types.
Sure, sounds good. I'll start out. My name is Mike Trianos. I work for Transcourt. I'm the VP Maintenance and Fleet. Been in the tanker industry specifically for just over 15 years now. And being in the transport industry, my entire career in the transport industry has been in tank.
Nice.
And I'm Carlos Duarte. I'm the Regional Account Manager for Ontario and Manitoba. I've been in this industry over 5 years. Really enjoy it.
Nice. So, maybe like KP was talking about, maybe talk a little bit about your background pictures. What are we seeing and what makes them special?
Sure, I'll go
besides
first.
Besides the mountains.
Yeah, so behind me, what's pictured is a B train. This is an FRP trailer, which FRP basically stands for fiberglass reinforced plastic, typically used for hauling chemicals, mostly hazmat chemicals that could be used in the industrial industry. Sometimes used in water treatment plants, that sort of thing. But typically in FRP trailers, a lot of nasty stuff gets hauled in them. So the one that's pictured here behind me is a new one, and they kind of look good when they're new, that's for sure.
I was going to say, it's nice and shiny and red.
Yeah.
Yeah, and behind me, traveling through the mountains, is a nice shiny stainless steel quad chemical tanker.
Yeah, so chemical tankers. So what's the difference between what's hauled in your chemical tanker and what's hauled in the big red there?
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so basically, the one that's pictured there behind Carlos is the barrel itself is made out of stainless steel.
Right.
The one pictured behind me is made out of fiberglass resin. They're both chemical tanks. One is coded 412, one is coded 407. There are some chemicals that can be hauled in a stainless steel tank, but at a certain percentage, they cause issues to the tank. They can cause pitting, thinning of the barrel, that sort of thing. Some of those same chemicals can be put in an FRP trailer. And in an FRP trailer, they're not as detrimental to the tank as they would be in a stainless unit. That's, the Coles Notes version.
Mm-hmm. Which is great. So, and for those people listening, when it comes to trucking, at least it goes, everybody does the drive-in. A few people do the reefer. Then you got the flatbed guys. Then you got the overdimensional guys. Then you got the bobtailers, and then you got the tanker guys, right? Like that's the specialization of you see a lot of those tankers, but it takes a real special kind of driver to get behind them and move them, because there's so many different aspects of that. Is it a tough industry from your guys' perspective?
Tough as far as it's heavily regulated, which is great because obviously the customers are hauling hazardous, dangerous product, right? So it has to be very regulated. As far as the operators, they have to be, once again, very trained compared to a drive-in operator. There's a lot more involved in becoming a qualified professional tanker operator. So yeah, it's a different world, the tanker world, and we look at it as being almost at the top of the food chain, really, because when you're looking at all different types of transportation logistics, the tanker is really the top. It's really the peak of the mountain. No pun intended. It's
You did that on
it's
purpose.
it's a whole nother level, guys.
So
Yeah, just to expand on what Carlos said, maybe you guys might be able to visualize this a little bit, but looking at it from how the drivers are trained, safety. Typically on a flatbed load or a dry van load, the products you're hauling are solid and strapped down. When you're talking liquid, that's a live load. So if you can imagine, a trailer that isn't quite filled to the very top, you hit the brakes, all of a sudden this big wave comes, hits the front of the tank, and then that wave goes the other way, hits the back of the tank, then it comes right back to the front of the tank. I can tell you a quick story of one time I was on my way home from work, and I was stopped at, the light had changed, and of course I stopped, and there was a truck. He hit his brakes hard. I stopped in time, but through the duration of the red light, the truck was inching forward bit by bit, and by the time the light went green, he was 6 feet out into the intersection. So
wow,
that's a lot of force, and it pushes these guys out. So being aware of that as a driver, your reaction time has to be, you've got to be paying attention. You can't be flipping around to radio stations or on a cell phone, or not with a live load. You have to be tuned right in the entire time you're moving it. So yeah, these guys are trained quite heavily, and very responsible. Some of the best drivers in the end. I'm not putting down drivers in any other industry. There's good drivers everywhere, but on a whole, almost every single driver that's in the tank industry is a top shelf driver.
and I think that's what makes it most challenging to find good tanking companies out there, because it's so specialized. You need such, you even touched upon insurance, but you need such a specialized driver that not everybody's doing it, right? And there's only, I think, from conversations in the past, is there's only a handful of companies that even do tankers, right? So that doesn't mean that everybody should go out and buy a tanker. It means there's a lot of it's a difficult entry point for anybody to penetrate into that market unless you know exactly what you're doing. And even when you penetrate, it's hard to get more than one, because an insurance company might insure you for one truck, but to get 10, 15, or 20 on a hauling asphalt or hauling whatever, it's difficult, right?
Yeah, and to take it one step further for the driver, so not only do they have to be, top shelf drivers, I mean, a lot of the products they're hauling are hazardous materials, hazmat, chemicals. And so, I mean, the handling, the way the driver follows procedure when he's loading and unloading, it's rather tricky. It's doing things in a proper order, proper safety training, so that should something go wrong during the loading or unloading process, you react quickly. You know who to call, how to rectify the situation, and hopefully that sort of thing never happens. And that's why the drivers are so important, that they're paying attention to these trailers. They know every bolt on them. Like I say, they go above and beyond just getting a product from A to B. No doubt about that.
So from your guys,
yeah, go ahead.
So from your guys' experience, is it most drivers kind of level up from equipment type? So do most drivers, start with the dry vans and then slowly work their way up, or is there, you see drivers, they'll get their license and they'll specifically train to drive this sort of equipment?
I mean, it's a mix. It really is a mix. Like, I mean, a lot of these drivers, when they start hauling a chemical or fuel, they're pretty much dedicated to that company for years and years. It's not like type of industry where these operators are hopping around, but once they're in it, it's for the long haul, these operators. But earlier you touched on insurance, which is anyone planning to get into this industry, the tanker world, I mean, insurance is a very key component of the whole package. Obviously, when you're driving a chemical tanker or a fuel tanker, I mean, these things are involved in accidents. We're talking millions of dollars in damages and liabilities, right? So anyone who is considering getting into the tanker world should really do their due diligence, their homework on insurance to make sure that they have a clean CVOR. So when they start off, you know what, they can get great rates. But it's an issue with everybody, even dry vans, freight or insurance now is a problem.
Yeah, even to that point, because you're thinking about it. If a driver gets in an accident and spills, cereal boxes across the highway, you can clean that up relatively easy. You have one of those nice big reds and they get punctured and all that worse kind of starts spilling everywhere. You're digging deep to get that material out of the ground, and the government's gonna be chasing that mighty big dollar to get that cleaned up, right?
Yeah, and you can imagine if something dreadful like that happened, like a rollover, and it happens in a creek or a waterway. It's incredible, and you'd be surprised. A lot of people would be surprised what's rolling around on the highway out there. It's all safe, it's all contained, it's heavily, like Carlos mentioned earlier, heavily regulated, and there are safety protocols at every company, and everyone adheres to them strictly. And there are certain protections built into these tanks as well too to keep them safe. God forbid something like that happens, like a rollover. But yeah, you can imagine, if some of these chemicals ever, got into a stream or river, it would be astronomical, the expense involved in cleanup for sure.
Yeah, but it also speaks volumes to the quality of the drivers, like you were talking about earlier, because I think you hear about more train derailments and stuff happening than you ever do about a tanker getting into, like drive-ins happen, reefers happen, flat decks happen, whatever.
Sure.
To be honest, I very rarely hear about any tankers ever getting into a position where it spills all across. I'm sure it happens, but the frequency level is so much lower, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, even you're talking about the specialized things that you're hauling. I remember one of the previous companies I used to work at that we used to haul. We used to put them in the drive-ins because of the way they had to put it in. But I know they hauled them in the tankers as well. It's for Baker Hughes, which does the special chemicals into the oil wells. And they were telling us, because they even imagine, KP, one skid of this stuff was like worth $10 million. So they used to get a whole trailer for this one skid of chemical.
Yeah.
Because as soon as they put into the oil well, it kills all bacterial life and everything that's in it. So if it got, like you said, into the water, it kills everything. So imagine a whole tanker carrying that stuff goes on the highway, or even worse, it's on the Ocean X. Something happens and it spills into the ocean. That's not a good.
Bye-bye to the fishies.
Bye-bye to the fishies, right?
Not good.
Right.
So that's why I think, like you're saying, the way the equipment is built, the way that the drivers are running the equipment, it is like another level of tier of proficiency on that. They have to have that ability to do that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So what do you, and the other thing I want to talk about too is the pricing of that equipment must be so much more than a reefer, a drive-in, or a reefer, or a flat deck, or anything like that. Tell us a little bit about, the pricing models of some of those compared to other equipment, because that's another barrier of entry into that business. Why people go, maybe it's good money, but there's a very good reason why it's good money, because heck.
Sure.
And that's a great question, because compared to a dry van might cost, let's say, $40,000, or if you go with a reefer, maybe around $75,000. When you're looking at even a simple a tandem chemical tanker, we're already over $100,000. If you're looking at a B train, let's say a propane tanker like a B train, you're like $500,000. So your initial capital investment is huge. But that's why with our business, we offer obviously leasing, right? Short-term leasing, long-term leasing to bridge that gap. Because if you're it all depends. We try to create as much flexibility to provide as many options to our customers as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you're looking at the initial purchase price, you might get a sticker shock. There's a lot of ways to acquire that asset through us without being just a outright purchase, but there is a big difference between a tanker and a dry van for sure, or a flatbed.
Sure.
I have a question I has, what would you say like the top, I know we said chemicals are hauled, but what would you say the top three, maybe like the one top non-has commodity that's kind of hauled in these sort of stuff, and like a couple of hazmat chemicals that are hauled in these equipment?
Sorry, non-hazmats?
So like, I know like sugar is hauled in tankers, but I guess something outside of sugar that we can see that would be hauled in tankers as well.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Some examples
sure.
of what you can, okay.
It's funny you mentioned sugar. I would there's liquid sugar, like liquid glucose, which is a food grade product and would go in a food grade tanker. That would definitely be one of them. Liquid glucose is found in almost every single thing in your cupboard, and probably half the things in your fridge as well too. So I would say that's definitely going to be one. The other things would probably be chemicals for water treatment. So there's companies out there, you know, obviously we go through a lot of water. So there are companies out there that are hauling products that go into the water treatment process. And I don't know, I'd have to think of a third, but those are a couple of good examples of you know, non-hazmat materials that are being hauled around on the road. Milk is another one. Definitely, you know, the milk and dairy industry, that's huge. I mean, it goes in our coffees, our kids are drinking it.
Does that include oat milk?
Sorry, what?
Oat milk.
Oat milk.
Yes.
No, I'm specifically talking cow's milk anyway.
Oh, okay. So no goat milk, no
there's
almond milk.
No, there is goat milk. Yeah,
Oh,
there's goat milk floating around out there as well too. Oh yeah, but most of it's cow's milk. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You're gonna say something else, Carl. So you sound like you had maybe another suggestion.
No, I was going to say the fun thing with this industry is we're always getting requests for like products you would never think of.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many chemicals are out there that people can haul in a tanker. It's absolutely incredible.
Because you also do like, isn't that grains also go in some tankers as well?
Grains? Well,
yeah, like oats, but not the milk part.
Well, with ours, like with our dry bulk tankers, for example, I mean, you can haul flour, right?
Okay.
Like
sugar,
grains. I mean, it all depends on the size of the grain. If it's more of a powdered product, then yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So dry bulk trailers haul plastic as well, plastic pellets, which is the size of grain. So you know, on dry bulk, you've got some food grade stuff. There's cement, powdered cement, the Portland cement that goes to all the plants. There's you know, anything that's powdered. Plastic pellets, though, that's really popular as well too. I mean, everything around us has got plastic in it. So there's a lot of plastic pellets going around as well.
Yeah, actually, another important thing that drivers should consider, or anyone wanting to get in the industry, is you have to keep washing the interior of these tankers. Whenever you make a haul, right? If you switch, you got to wash that out, right?
Yeah, I was actually going to touch upon that. Like, how often do you have to be careful what you're hauling from one thing to another? Because you know, driving, I go down, I'm taking cereal on the way back. I'm taking canned dog food. It makes no difference. But you know, I take milk on the way down. I can't be hauling chlorine on the way back up, right? So. And how does that work for drivers? Like, how do you find reloads if you're so specialized in only one commodity and the commodity might not be anywhere close by where you're picking up?
Well, that's why the rates are higher with tankers, right? Because I mean, sometimes you're probably traveling back, you're bobtailing back, you're traveling, you know, empty, and with an empty load, you're going one direction, right? And it all depends what you're hauling. If you're dropping off and picking up the same product, it's not an issue, but you got to be very careful. You can't be cross-contaminating different products. It has to be the same. And after you get a wash ticket that proves that was actually washed, right? So once again, there's more regulations part of the tanker world.
Is it like a specialized wash, or is it just the same kind of wash that we do for drive-ins and reefers?
There are specialized washes. There's just a regular soap and water wash. There are caustic washes. Depends what was in the tank before. It depends on the viscosity of it. If it's an oily substance and you wash it with soap and water, does it actually remove all the water or all the oils film on the side? So, I mean, there's the temperature of the wash too, when you're getting it done, that sort of thing. There are specialists and companies out there, wash companies, that know all about this. And that's why when you drop a trailer off to a wash facility, the first question they have for you is what was the last contained? That's what they want to know. Same thing when a trailer has to go into a shop for maintenance. You can't bring what they call in the industry a hot trailer, meaning there's product left over from your last haul. It has to be washed before it goes into the shop, and there's got to be a wash ticket. And on that wash ticket, it'll tell that shop what the last contained was, so that if they have to do a confined space entry and go inside the tank, they know, okay, this is what it had in there last time. Let's test the air inside the tank to make sure it's breathable and we can go in there. Because, there have been tragedies over the years where unfortunately, there's guys that haven't followed procedure, and unknowing to them, the air inside the tank was bad and have subsequently lost their life because of it. And that's a tragedy, something that can be prevented through safety and protocols. But it happens, and thank goodness it's very rare. But like we were saying before, this heavily regulated industry, you really have to know what you're hauling, who's hauling it, have your safety protocols in place. And think of the environment. There's just so many different factors that you have to be aware of in the tank. And that just goes back to what Carlo was saying. It's tank is considered like top of the food chain. Kind of a rude thing to say when, especially if somebody that's not in the tank industry, has a lot of pride in their fleet and what they do, and rightly so. It's just a different world because there's so many other factors involved other than just getting that product to where it's going on time. There's in order to do that in the tank industry, there's a lot of other pieces that have to fall into place, other than just getting the load on the back of the trailer.
I guess I think you touched on preventative measures that drivers take. What are some things that, compared to, I guess, a regular driver would be taking a dry van load, he'll do like his wheel check, check around. What are some things that drivers do differently compared to dry vans and reefers for specialized equipment like the breach train behind yourself or the tanker?
So you're talking about when the driver does a circle check before he goes?
Yep.
Oh yeah. Well, there's on the trailer there are vents up top. So if whether or not it's the vents are meant to hold pressure or not, or whether the vessel is built to hold pressure or not, or it's atmospheric. So the vents have to be working. Typically they don't check those, but they'll definitely make sure that the vents are on there. The manway lid is closed down, locked down tight. The valves on the outside of the trailer are operational. A lot of these trailers have vapor recovery that gets tested, so that when they get to where they're going, if they're unloading a product that produces vapor, that vapor is captured and goes back into the tank. There are pressure lines. There's a whole host of different things that the driver's checking before they hit the road. That's for sure. On top of the tires and the lights and that sort of thing. Yeah, there's a few extra things, and typically drivers that have been driving for years know these things, but somebody that's more a novice driver in tanker that's maybe got 3 or 4 years experience might have a checklist that they go through, that's provided to them by the carrier, so that when they go around, they know what they're looking for and they know what they're checking.
I guess this is something we touched on yesterday, where the topic of driver shortage came up, and we kind of came to a conclusion that there isn't a shortage of drivers, it's a shortage of qualified drivers, right? So now, considering that your guys, sector of the industry is even more specialized, is there an even more of a shortage of qualified drivers compared to the regular market, or how's that looking?
Yeah, it's all relative. You're right, and there is a shortage, absolutely. Like I have customers, they have the work, they just don't have the drivers, right? And it's quite a long process to get the proper drivers, get them trained. I mean, we're looking at years, right? So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, no doubt about it. But you know what? With a lot of education in the industry, and I know they're trying to, the government's trying to spend more money trying to educate, recruit, and get younger people into this industry, right? Because there's a lot of good talent out there, and but one of the nice things with the tank, I mean, a lot of these runs they're doing are, they can do a run within 4 or 5 hours in a day. They're back home, so it can be a very a daily.
Oh, I think Carlos froze.
Daily job. And a lot of people want a lot of drivers don't want to be on the road, for 2 days nonstop. They want to be back home with their family. And and tank gives you that opportunity to be back home, every day pretty much. Would you agree, Mike?
Yeah, I would. I typically there's very little long haul in tank. Like somebody in BC is not gonna, order something from Ontario. They're gonna order from somebody in BC, and that driver is gonna move it. So I would agree with you, Carlos. There's most drivers in the tank industry, they are going to be home at the end of the day.
Well, isn't that more of a, if someone orders something from Ontario to go to BC, it would go on the rail first, and then that would be transferred and then locally delivered? Because you wouldn't very rarely run across the country that way with a tanker, right? It wouldn't make sense.
It depends on the volume of what you're looking for. I mean, if let's say you needed a rail car of product, I don't know how quickly the mode of train would be able to get it out to BC. Just as an example, from Ontario to BC, it may take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get out there. Most people can't wait that long for their product. So sometimes tank is the best option.
So one thing that we talked about before, and we touched upon, and I think it's an important distinction as well, is the safety aspect of the drivers. They have to be more attentive, because we talked about liquid asphalt, right? When we're hauling liquid asphalt, they gotta be very, very careful, because you guys were telling us before, like the heat of just the asphalt being poured in, where you're saying that the arms could be like burnt off if they're not careful, if they don't know what they're doing. And that's why there isn't such a different way of operating all this equipment, and that's why you need that specialized driver, right?
Yeah, that's right. The asphalt, just on your example, when asphalt's loaded, it's loaded typically at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty hot, right? And I mean, you get a drop of that on your hands, it's not like you can just wipe it off. That stuff sticks. So, you definitely want to be, careful around that sort of thing. And it's knowing how your tanker is going to react as well too. I remember Carlos and I had a conversation recently about an asphalt trailer that was loading in Hamilton that I had the pleasure of watching being loaded. And it was the winter. It was like November, December, so it was cold outside. And the trailer's cold, and then they dumped this liquid asphalt in it at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and you just hear this trailer banging and making all kinds of noise as it expands, right? And the trailer actually grew 9 inches in length.
No.
So you got to imagine, you got a 50-foot trailer, and then when you're done loading it, it's 50 feet 9 inches long.
That's
so
impressive.
It actually expanded 9 inches. Yeah. So and it made a lot of noise getting there too. I can tell.
It became extra specialized.
Yeah, it became extra specialized. That's interesting, because you don't really think about it in those terms. But even on the opposite effect, that you're holding a liquid milk, and it's really cold outside, that milk might freeze, right? If you don't move it fast enough, or if you don't time it correctly. Because I don't think you don't heat the milk when it's inside the bulk container, right?
Right, but where a milk trailer actually would be insulated. So you'd have the barrel, but on the outside of the barrel, like the one that you see behind me, you see those rings that go around the outside?
Yeah.
Those rings are what give the barrel strength. And regardless of whether it's an aluminum barrel or a stainless steel barrel or a fiberglass barrel, those rings give the barrel strength. So if you can imagine the gaps in between the rings covered in insulation, and then finished off with stainless steel on the outside, like the one
My picture, yeah.
Carlos. So that one there is an insulated tank. It's got that nice, smooth, shiny look to it on the outside, where the one behind me, you can actually see you can see the barrel and the rings around it. So yeah, a milk tank would be insulated. Some chemical tanks would be insulated. Some of the chemical tanks are actually heated as well too. So you can have an in-transit heat system that plugs right into the truck's radiator system. So you've got that glycol flowing at the bottom of the barrel to sort of help heat the product inside the tank so that it doesn't freeze.
That's interesting. What was I going to say? So it must be, because we talked about how specialized everything is, all the equipment is, and you guys sell and lease this equipment, and it must be such a niche. It must be such a hard sell for you guys to even operate in this segment of the business, because only a certain amount of people can buy them, right? Like that's an interesting model in itself, and you guys are quite successful. You're well, I think one of the leaders in Canada for it.
North America, actually.
Yeah, in North America, yeah.
Even better, right? That's what I like to hear. Good Canadian. I remember it's a Canadian company, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Canadian company, but we're in the U.S. as well too. Our fleet's 609 trailers, and 1/3 of that is in the U.S. Yeah.
A Canadian company, number one in North America, a success in itself. What made you guys so successful? What separates you guys differently? What's your, without telling us your secret sauce?
Sure.
What breaks you apart from everybody else, and how do you guys continue doing it and making that different for the future?
Yeah, well, I think I'll try to answer that one. I mean, well,
They got Carlos on the team.
Well, if I can get in first, I would definitely say that it starts from the top. It starts with our president and Bruce Duarte and his vision and his knowledge. He's been in the industry a long time. He got his start at a tank manufacturer that is now since resolved, but it's the culture that he brings, it's the vision that he has, it is the the affiliations that he has in the industry, the people that he's got to know, the culture he creates in our company, dealing with the best manufacturers with the best equipment, making sure when he it's quite an honor to work at Transcourt. At Transcourt, we don't just fill positions, we actually find the people that best fit the job. So we all look at it as a compliment by even being employed there. And as well, we're all very proud of the way the company conducts itself throughout the industry.
Yeah, and to add to that, like I said, Bruce started the business about 23 years ago, and he started out with 6 tankers, and he basically built it. And his number one motto has been, provide the best leasing experience in the industry, right? And customers that he started out with 23 years ago are still with us today, and they've grown, and they have hundreds and hundreds of tankers in their fleets. So it's not just selling a commodity. It's really like a long-term partnership, understanding the customers, right? And customers appreciate that. They'll call us, ask us for advice, right? And we'll try to help them out, right? Whether it's what's the right proper the proper tanker to haul their product, what's the best term for the contract. Like, we're very, very flexible. If a customer is seasonal, we'll work with them on that. We'll charge different rates depending on the time of year. And
That's
I think
interesting.
that's why a lot of customers keep coming back to Transcourt, and we've built a solid brand, and we're very proud of it. And like Mike said, all the people within our company at Transcourt, they're like family. It's a great bunch of people. Like, people say that, but we honestly mean it. It's a great, great company to work for.
Here, Mike, plug your ears and tell us the truth now, Carlos.
You know what? I can't say anything negative. And also Transcourt is very charitable. Like they donate back to the community because it's a two-way street with our company. We really appreciate, our customers, what they do, and we love giving back. Like that's a big part of our ownership at Transcourt.
I guess I was reading an article, well, not reading, I saw a headline where they're saying there's a steel, I'm just being honest. Most people just headline read it, but there was a steel shortage. So I just want to say, obviously the equipment that we're using is very steel or metal intensive, right? So has that, I guess, made an impact in terms of getting the equipment made, or, you guys even finding those equipments that you're able to, buy and lease out on your end from the manufacturers?
Yeah, from our end, it basically just affects the price of the trailer. If there's tariffs on aluminum or surcharges on stainless steel and that sort of thing, that all gets reflected in the pricing that we get from the manufacturers. So prices do fluctuate depending on our governments and the tariffs and the taxes that they put on metals that are crossing the border, that sort of thing. It works the other way as well too, but you have to push the manufacturers a little bit because sometimes they get cheaper. The prices for metal get cheaper. It's based on supply and demand. And right now with COVID and that sort of thing, there's been kind of a lull in manufacturing, so pricing has come down a little bit. So it allows you to sort of push for that better price. But when things are ramped up and things are busy and the economy is booming, typically those prices go up and they stay up. And that's when the manufacturers play hardball and say, do you want it? That's how much it costs. If you don't, the next guy will take it. It's up to you. So there is a game, but on a whole, I would say for the most part, the pricing has been pretty stable for the last decade or so. Of course, there's been small surcharges and some prices that go up, but then again, it goes by quantity as well too. If you talk to a manufacturer and you're going to buy one trailer, you might get one price, but if you say I want to buy 50 of those trailers, your price is going to change, guaranteed. Yep. So it's all relative.
So the other question I had is customs. When you're going across the border, is it easier or harder? Because in my mind, it should be easier. It's just one product, that's it, it's done. But at the same time, you kind of think about it a little bit deeper. That it depends on obviously what you're hauling, and there's a lot more regulation against everything you're hauling. So it might not be as easy as I think it is to get across the border with a tanker.
Which way are you going to? Are you coming U.S. to Canada or Canada to U.S.? Because if you've got an American driver coming across to Canada, it's getting more and more difficult to find, number one, qualified drivers to haul tank, a driver that's got a good passport, a driver that's had his physical, had his drug test and that sort of thing, and he's clean. I'm not saying they're not out there. It's just that as we all know, there's a driver shortage, and year after year there's fewer and fewer drivers. There are more and more drivers that retire every year, so that pool of drivers keeps getting smaller. And the transportation industry has done, I kind of don't even want to say it, but
just say it.
They've done kind of, I think, this is a nice way to put it, a mediocre job, I would say, of attracting youth to the industry and letting them know that everybody wants to be. I see it with my little nephews. They all want to be computer programmers and
rock stars.
And rock stars. And I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to have my own video blog, and YouTube's going to pay me. And
hey,
we're working our way up.
We're trying to educate the youth to join tankers here.
I don't mean anything by it, guys. I'm just saying, this is what they think in their minds. And that's great if you've got like what you guys have, like a niche video blog. You can't just talk about the weather. No one's going to tune in. So it's attracting new people to the industry, and it's the perception people have when they see a driver. They go, he's just a driver. Just a driver? Yeah, he's a tank driver. Do you know how much that guy makes a year? And all he does is he's a very safe guy. He knows what he's doing. He gets his product to where it's going. He makes a good living. He puts food on the table for his family. He pays his mortgage, and he makes a decent living. You'd be shocking at how much some of these drivers are making compared to just your regular.
And it's deserved too. It's well deserved. It's not I should be shocked. They put a lot of hard work to be able to do that. But even to that note, and you're talking about the driver shortage, and I'm going to take it back to one of our earlier episodes. Remember when Jennifer was talking about women in trucking? Yeah. There's a big shortage because there's not enough women in trucking. And I bet you that percentage of women in tankers is even smaller than the women in just regular trucking. Yeah. Right? So there's a huge untapped market for recruitment right there. Right? Because it's more specialized. It's not so how do I PC it like Mike did? I'm not even going to try. It's a lot more. I think it would be a lot more in my mind safer because it's so niche and so specific, and that it would be more receptive to the woman trucker to be part of that kind of community. And that you're right. There should be more of that education on how to get more women into that trucking aspect. I know they set up a specific trucking school, I think, out in Kitchener-Waterloo in Ontario that gears towards women trucking. Do they have a specialized program for specialized tankers there? If not, that's something you guys definitely should hit up for them and have that conversation, because that's a great part of the workforce that we're not tapping into, right?
Yeah. 2 years ago, actually, I had the pleasure of having dinner with the truck driver of the year in the U.S. as awarded by the NTTC, which is tank specific. And it was a woman. Her name, I don't recall her name off the top of my head, but we had dinner together, and she was telling me stories, and it's the perception too of an industry that's male dominated for the time being, that oh wow, a woman driver, does she know what she's doing? And she told me a story that was that I still remember, where she pulled up a tank, and she was at the facility she was going to unload at, and the driver said, well, it's a really tight space, so you might have to jackknife it 2 or 3 times to fit in. And she just went, oh, okay. And then she just pulled up, backed it in first shot, and said, how's that? And she was a driver for 30 years in tank specific. So yeah, there's and she was I remember her telling me the look on the guy's face when I did it first shot. He came and said, I've never seen anybody, male or female, pull a trailer in one shot. And she said, well, surprise, surprise. So that, you hear stories, you hear stories like that, but yeah, it's a growing segment in the industry. And I think it's kind of welcome, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the next progression. Like you're talking about getting more youths in there, new Canadians it's a great opportunity for them to make the impact on Canada and the US, women in trucking. But we always talk about it. I joke because I'm a little bit older. Had I known about trucking when I was younger, it would have been a different game. I would have started off probably hauling tankers for a few years, to pay for my education. You do that 4 years, you have your university paid off, you probably have your first down payment for your house. You have not only do you have your university paid off, not only do you have your down payment for your house, you probably have enough money to keep yourself established for those 5 years, because you're living either at home or in your truck. You got no overhead. It's for me, it's a win-win that the governments of the states and the provinces should be definitely pushing. Right? It just makes sense all around, right?
Yeah, if you have a strategic plan, if you have a plan, it can be a lucrative industry without question.
Yep. I know drivers, and we've had drivers in the previous companies that either owner ops that making well into the 6-figure mark very comfortably, because they're very organized, they're very entrepreneur. Company drivers are making very good money as well, close to 6, if not beyond 6-figure mark, if not beyond, but in a good 6-figure mark, because it's your education piece of how do you go about doing it, making sure you're doing the right loads, making sure you're getting the right things, being entrepreneur about it. and being smart about it. And those smart drivers end up either owning their companies or hauling tankers and doing different things, right?
Some of the most successful companies, and Carlo, you can probably comment on this and take it a step further, but some of the most successful tank companies out there right now, the owners were truck drivers and started with a truck and a trailer, and now have 200 trailers in their fleet, 50 employees, 20 or 30 or 40 drivers on staff. And these are just hardworking guys that took a chance, had a plan, and have been working at it for 20, 30 years, and are some of the most successful companies out there that we deal with. And it all started with an AZ or DZ license and a truck.
So for perspective, what's the largest, and you don't have to say the name of it, but what's the largest tanker fleet in North America? What's their size?
Ooh, I'd only be guessing. There's a couple of big ones out there, but 20,
More than 1,000?
20, 30, 40, 50,000 tanks.
Yeah.
Really?
Wow, really?
I'm surprised. I thought it was gonna be like 1,000, to be honest.
Oh, bigger.
Yeah, when we're talking North America, yeah, the numbers are huge. Yeah, if you're looking down in the States, some of these are huge.
Yeah.
Let's run it down to Canada then.
Well, but even the 20, 30,000, that's like competing with the big, like the Schneiders who have like the 60,000 trailers. I didn't think that a single company would have that many. That's amazing. That's impressive. And that goes my whole second point about there's an opportunity for penetration, because there's not too many people doing it, but now it's like, well, hey, 20,000 tankers, but I can't imagine the insurance on that or all the aspect that goes into that. That's crazy.
Yeah, and some of those big companies are self-insured. Some of them are, listed on the stock markets. So it's usually the mid-size and smaller size companies that are typically going out and trying to get insurance.
Yeah, and it's like everything in the market is getting smaller, right?
Yep.
Seeing these big companies buying out, profitable freight companies, right? So that pie is getting smaller and smaller, right? So that's what's happening.
Let's just say, I know for us, when the onset of COVID happened, for the most part, there was an initial shock, and we saw a dip in our type of freight. Would you say in your guys' industry for your type of freight was it kind of steady? Everything was still flowing, or was there an increase of the type of freight that was moving, or how did it play out on the initial onset when COVID did go off?
Well, it's obviously in Western Canada it took a bit of a hit, obviously with the crude oil market, sort of the taps went dry. But the nice thing with our fleet, we're very diversified, so we have a nice mix of tankers that cover basically pretty much every product. So we didn't really feel the impact that much, but Western Canada did take a bit of a hit for crude oil.
So another question I would have is, what do you think the percentage is when you're doing tanker work? What percentage is it direct customers, and how many brokers are out there that do tanker work? Because I can't see brokerages getting into tanker work because it's so specialized. There's only so many guys that are doing it. It's hard to say, be like, well, yeah, I know this. I know John, and he owns a few tankers, and the customer would be like, yeah, John Smith with this tanking company. Be like, oh yeah, you know him too, yeah. So how many brokers are out there doing tanker work?
Exactly.
Well, don't know really.
No.
There are brokers out there, and whether they're operating independently or whether they're hired on to fleets. The biggest factor around that, and we had a little lunch and learn today with an insurance executive, and they were talking about how difficult it is to get these broker drivers insured properly, hauling these hazmat loads and that sort of thing, right? And how it just in an industry with a driver shortage, and when I say an industry, I'm not talking tank, I'm talking transportation as a whole, with a driver shortage, and insurance becoming more and more difficult to get, you're starting to see, just a slowdown when it comes to, finding drivers for deliveries and other sectors as well too. I mean, it's just at the moment, I think the industry is managing on a whole, but I think everyone in the industry is aware that we keep kicking the can down the road with attracting newer and younger people to the industry. There is going to come a time where, do we rely on electric trucks and GPS and with that driverless trucks that are just running around on the road? I don't think you'll ever see driverless trucks in the tank industry, because you need somebody there to react if there's a leak. A driverless truck's not going to detect a leak. Maybe it can, I don't know, but will it be able to, plug the leak up or fix the leak while in transit?
You watched Transformers as a kid. The little
Anything's
drone will
possible.
come out and it'll go fix it and it'll fly back in. And it transforms and starts walking. We're all good.
Well, I think that's who knows? It might be possible, but not during my lifetime. I think that's a couple hundred years out, maybe.
No, Mike, it's around the corner. You're not that old. Who are you kidding? You have anything you wanted to ask there, Mr. KP?
Nothing else right now.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I think we had a great conversation. I definitely learned a lot about tankers. I didn't know. I know KP learned a whole bunch. It was great having you guys, and hopefully we're going to make it out to, your location when the COVID's down and check out a tanker in person, show people what a tanker looks like, talk to some of those drivers that you're talking about, and get a little bit more personal and on that education piece, because I think that's a very big value add in our industry.
Absolutely.
And ideally attract some people to ask some questions and go, how do I get into this? And how do we do it successfully? And I'm sure you guys, with your guys' model about leasing and short-term, long-term, you guys can make it work if you get the right drivers, the right companies in there. And I'm sure you guys will be out there willing to help. And I know, anybody has questions, we'll steer them to Carlos and Mike and the Transcourt team, and we can make something happen.
Well, appreciate you guys having us out. I really do. I enjoyed it, and believe it or not, I love this industry. It's something new every day. But I hope we can do this again in the future. Absolutely.
And now you're one of those famous video bloggers that you're talking about now.
Joe Rogan, yeah.
Yeah, well, Mike's a natural.
There you go. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and then we'll see you guys soon. Cheers.
See you guys. Thank you.
Bye.